What's up, guys? This is the It Ain't Easy podcast. I'm your host, Dom Sharanson. Let's get it. Today, we have Connor Emeny on the podcast today. Really excited. He's an Ironman competitor. I think it's been 5 that you've competed in so far, and he wants to be the youngest man to compete in 6 different continents across the globe. Connor, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks, Dom. So stoked to be here.
Cool. So I think we know, with Ironmans comes an insane amount of training. What we don't know is where did you get the mindset from, and maybe take us back to elementary Connor. Where did you grow up? What was school like for you? What kind of sports did you participate in?
Yeah, so I grew up in Toronto, had 2 older brothers, pretty average kid to be honest. Played every sport that kind of came my way: soccer, volleyball, hockey, a little ping pong here and there,
Okay.
and just kind of always was obsessed with playing and running around. And I think having 2 older brothers, being 3 years older than I was, I quickly kind of became pretty competitive to get to their level. And so soon enough, I was playing like 3 years higher in hockey for a summer, and
Cool.
just kind of like always had this competitiveness side to me. But yeah, I just love to compete, love to win, and love to challenge myself from like a pretty early age.
No, that's awesome. And I think as athletes, it comes natural to us. We understand um, what kind of dedication is required at that age to play like that kind of club system of hockey or whatever it may be. For those that don't understand, could you explain like what is kind of like the day to day for you? This is probably age 6 you started playing hockey, but when it got really competitive for you, what age was that, and what were the day to days looking like?
Yeah, so I played kind of housey hockey up until I was maybe, 10, 12, 13 years old. So that was kind of once, twice a week. But as soon as I hit kind of grade 5 and 6 and 7, then it started to pick up, and I started playing rep hockey, double A. And we were playing, 2 games a week with like 2 to 3 practices depending on the time of the year.
Yep.
So I would go to school, pack my bag, hockey bag. My dad would pick me up, and we'd go straight to the game right after school, or do like long road trips on the weekend for a destination tournament. But yeah, sports always was kind of this priority around life. It was like something that you meet all your friends with, you kind of learn who you are and challenge yourself. But it was always kind of fun up until I went to St. Mike's, which was grade 7s through 12. And that was kind of a sports-oriented school. Had a lot of really cool athletes and bred athletes from that school program, anywhere from NHL hockey players to track like Olympic athletes. And so getting early into that school, I played competitive hockey on their St. Mike's team, and did cross-country, track, every kind of program you could do. But it was full on, and I remember like days going to practice at 6 a.m. before school started, and that's like kind of when it got real, of developing this mindset of like putting in the work, early hours, getting up early, kind of doing things that would be challenging before the day even started. And I think that kind of molded me into that mindset of taking on harder challenges, discovering where my limits lie, and trying to be the best person I could be around these top level kind of performers around you, right? So just rising up to the occasion.
Absolutely. When it comes to, like I said before, like we really take it for granted, but there's so many lessons to be learned at the grassroots, just with regards to mental toughness. You're talking about 6 a.m. ice time and like waking up, and that's some things that probably 90%, 95% of children or teens at your age aren't doing. So you're already building kind of this platform for, creating separation. People talk about like 5 a.m. club and all that stuff, but it's like without even being aware of it, like we're subconsciously developing this mindset that's like so much stronger. And I'm sure that carries into business, it carries into like your academics, etc. What about just like the school environment? You said you went to St. Mike's. Was that like a private school?
It was,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So what was like the private school environment like? Was it cliquey? Was it like traditional high school? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, was fortunate to go to St. Mike's. I think it's an incredible school, and I mean, it was an all guy school, but I didn't kind of come from that like super privileged like place to afford to go there. It was more, I was on bursary and kind of got some scholarships through the like the application process of doing well on the entry test and kind of going there specifically for sports as well.
Cool.
So that kind of, I felt like this immediate, a lot of pressure on me to like I didn't deserve to be there,
Mm.
like it wasn't just kind of handed to me. So there was like, we're giving you this ticket that maybe there's like a better person to be there, but I felt like I had something to prove right from grade 7, and I think that was like something that was on my mind throughout the whole schooling of like fitting in with everyone else and dressing the certain way. We had a
Mm.
uniform, and we had to be on time. Like on time was 15 minutes early to class. Like if you're not there when the bell goes, like you're sitting outside the classroom for that period, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the mantra was teach me goodness, discipline, and knowledge. So I think discipline was such a forefront for students at an early age from grade 7 through 12. And you see like at grade 7 you're this little kid, and you see grade 12s who are getting full ride scholarships to Syracuse, or like making March Madness teams that you idolize, and you're like, wow, like
Absolutely.
looking up to these kids as giants, and you're like, how am I going to get there one day? But
Yeah. And that realization is like so powerful as like you said, a grade 7 versus a grade 12, because there's so much room for growth in that like 7 to 10, where the mindset isn't just like, okay, I'm competing with these 10th graders. Like you said, I'm competing against like the best that's going all across the country for different things. That's a special experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was pretty special, and I mean at the time like hockey was kind of my sport, what I loved the most. Like I think most Canadian born kids, like hockey is
Mm-hmm.
kind of our patriotic sport, and we're proud to play. So you have pictures of hundreds of NHL hockey players that came through the program, or play at the arena beside the school, and they have training camps in the summer where
Mm.
you see like PK Subban or Connor McDavid, or like crazy athletes that you watch on TV coming and training out of these programs.
Yeah.
And it just like opens your mind. And like now looking in hindsight, like some of the guys I walk the hallways with are in the NHL, or in the Olympics, and are like doing some pretty cool things. And
Mm-hmm.
I think looking back, you see like through osmosis, being in the environment, you start to pick up these characteristics like inherently that you might not even seek out. And kind of what you said about growing up, there's so many lessons you learn before you can even comprehend the lesson.
Yeah. And moving into kind of like the next phase for you, was that at Queen's University?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So did you continue to play sports?
Yes and no. So I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't end up. I was in grade 12 after kind of playing competitive hockey, and I played on our St. Michael's Majors team, and it was kind of this new division where we would travel throughout the states,
Mm-hmm.
play all the state schools, and try to get noticed to get a scholarship. And so at the time I was deciding to go to the States and play for a school called Robert Morris, which is in Pittsburgh, to
Yep.
play hockey. Or I got into a good program at Queens, and my hockey coach at the time also went to Queens, and he was a commerce graduate, and he kind of sat me down and kind of outlined my options for me, and pretty much persuaded me or convinced me that Queens might be the better route for me. So, I always loved sports, but I felt like at a time it was kind of time to hang up the skates and focus on my like academic career, and um, you know put my education first. And sports was always kind of something I enjoyed, so I did intramurals in the first year, and eventually tried out for the triathlon team, which we can get into. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting decision, and I think, you know, everybody says that like the athlete dies twice. Like there's that point where everybody hits, and for some people it's earlier, so for some people it's later, but it's that realization that like, you can take those characteristics from your sport and you can be a pro in so many other fields. Like it's not just this one space that you can excel in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like you had that revelation, like, I could go this route, but like the opportunities for like success are so much slimmer, and this is like, I have the academics, I have the mindset, I have the work ethic, like this is a guarantee, I'm going to take that. And I'm pretty sure Queens is one of the best. Like it was business school you went to there. It's probably like a top 4 business school in the country, right? Like, and so no question you made a great decision there. Um, what that first year at Queens, what was that like?
Oh man, I mean, I think I was in over my head. Like it was just kind of pretty awesome opportunity to do the commerce program, but it's a group of 400 students, and they choose kind of these high achievers, and once again it's coming from like a high achiever like high school to a high achiever university subgroup, right? And it's like all the valedictorians and people that were like 17 years old or 16 years old, and they've got 3 businesses already. I'm like, I feel like so out of place again, like what
Yeah.
the heck is going on here? But the same thing was like, I felt this sense of excitement of, I'm not the best person in the room, but that's the exact room you want to be in, right? Because now you're going to learn, now you're going to challenge yourself, and now you're going to get things thrown at you that you might not have been prepared for. And to me, that happened to be my first year curriculum load. It was like, here's finance, economics, statistics, like all these crazy courses on like a pretty intense level.
Yeah.
And they just throw this big workload at you that you have to manage and prioritize and get through and decide what's important, what's not as important, to kind of make the most of the experience. So yeah, I was super excited, but I was also nervous at the next 4 years and what that would look like. And I felt like I was just, jumping into the deep end again.
Mm-hmm. And so you spoke on like triathlon.
Yeah.
Is you were saying like in high school you did a little bit of like cross country. Was that more like cross training for you, or were you taking it pretty seriously then?
Honestly, it was kind of more for fun. Like
Yeah.
I just love to kind of run,
Okay.
and I just showed up to cross country because I had some good friends that were doing that team, and it's like, this could be just a great way to stay in shape for hockey. And then eventually like started to love it and went to track meets and met some really cool people, and I felt like the difference between the hockey world and the running world was quite vast actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like, love the hockey guys, and it's just such a different mentality. I think all the smartest kids at our school were also on the cross country team. I think it just requires a deeper level of discipline in
Yeah.
its own respect to get out self motivated and like show up every day. Whereas hockey is kind of more team oriented. You're relying on other people to kind of become better together and
Totally.
trust in the play. So it was this combination of like team versus individual, and kind of bridging the gap between the two that attracted me to cross country.
Mm-hmm.
But back to your question about like triathlon at Queens, like it's kind of a funny story on how I got into it. I mean, I never really did a triathlon before, but 2 of my buddies who I went to high school with went to Queens as well. We were like most students in first year, what clubs do we want to try? What teams should we try out for? And one of them's like, let's go try out for this triathlon club. And I was like, okay, let's do it. So the problem was one of the guys couldn't swim, so he didn't make it past the swim test. The other guy, his bike tire popped in the bike.
Oh no.
So out of the 3 of us, I was the only one that ended up crossing this line in the tryout and somehow did all right and made the team. And then I was like, I really enjoyed that. Like I found this was like 3 new disciplines that you're getting better at, or you could see yourself getting better at, versus like something you already know and you're so familiar with. And it was this whole new challenge. And then decided to do the team, and really enjoyed it in my first year. And it was all sprint races though, no distance.
Yeah.
All the races were 15-minute swim, 15-minute bike, 15-minute run, and stationary. So it was this pool, 15 minutes, how far you can go. Then you get on a stationary bike, 15 minutes. Like they had this
Wow.
metric, how fast and far you could go. and then 15 minutes around a track, and they would just create an algorithm to see like what your total score is depending on your speed, and that's how you would win the race or place in the race.
Crazy. Yeah, and so like in comparison to like the ultra marathons that you're about to run, like it's not very tailored to that. It's really just a completely different energy system. But what you're learning is like how to discipline yourself to like master these three different disciplines within the sport. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I kind of started really loving it. I started loving getting into the pool, and I pretty much couldn't swim. It's
Yeah.
like I got to learn how to swim now if I want to compete.
Wow.
So it would just get better and better, and then yeah, through that team, there was a guy that I would race head to head with named Ben Rudson, and the next year he went off and came like 14th at Kona, which is Ironman championships in Hawaii, which is
Okay.
this long distance kind of crazy thing. And in my mind, I was like, this was otherworldly. Like, how did this guy do that? Like, I would compete head to head with him, and he just kind of like over the summer, I guess, or over the next year, like put in this work, put in this discipline, and was able to do something pretty incredible. And that just like lit a fire under me of like, if he can do that, like I can do that. And I sent him a text and I was like, hey man, in like 2020, I'm going to do my first Ironman. And this was like 2017. So it was like 3 years out, but I just like had planted the seed, right? And I was like revisiting it over and over again. And then
Yeah.
we'll get into how I got there later, but eventually did my first one and sent him a text back and was just like, thanks for the motivation, man.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like, I think had you led with that, like, I'd be surprised. But like, based on your upbringing and kind of like having that chip through high school and like even in business school, all those things, you've always had that mindset where it's like, well, if he can do it, I could probably do it and push myself to that level. So here we are, like he's doing it. Hey, man, I'm gonna try this next.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we're 5 later. When you say like put in the work, like he put in the work that off season to like be prepared for this ultra marathon. What is that work?
Yeah. I mean, I can speak from my experience, but like it's long hours. It's like it's not even the training, but it's the discipline of like saying no to people, It's like you're sacrificing your social life and maybe things you want to do for this goal. And I know to me, like going in my first race, I needed to isolate myself because I'm such a yes man. I'm like, if
Yeah.
people are asking me, you want to go out, you want to do this, like I'm going to say yes more often than not. That's something I've been working on. But like to do an Ironman, like, you're doing 15 to 20 hours of training a week. And that's a big adjustment for doing a sprint triathlon or doing, something that you're training for, like a half marathon. It still requires a level of discipline, but this is like a whole new extreme of 3 disciplines, 3 times each week. So you're swimming 3 times a week, you're biking 3 times a week, and you're running 3 times a week if you want to make sure that you're not damaging your body when you go into race and you're like really prepared for that race. So
Yeah.
it means like
Wow.
early AMs, late PMs, but it becomes it becomes your hobby, it becomes your friends, your social circle, and like the kind of the people that you want to be around if you're like trying to achieve something too.
Yeah. Your first race, was this after college or during?
After.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess like, yeah, so did the kind of Queens triathlon team in my first year and a bit of second year, but I was also working like throughout university. So I was working for a company called Labatt and doing like the Budweiser guy, I was doing all this like beer promotions and marketing for Budweiser. So it was kind of this like catch-22 because I was this social guy, bringing people to bars and doing like cool activations and then waking up hungover in the pool to try and balance the two. And then at a certain point I had to say like, no, like I want, like I have this goal, like I need to prioritize my vision, my mindset, and like what I want to achieve. And it's hard, right? That's the sacrifice, and that's like the things that you have to make, those tough choices. But as I've done a few now, like, and you kind of have this similar mindset, you really start to pick out like your real friends and the people that they want to champion you to be that person, and like
Mm-hmm.
your real people are always going to be your friends, and there's always going to be time to socialize. If anything else, I learned there's always going to be another party. You know,
Absolutely.
so if you have something that you want to work towards, like put a date on it and like put your head down, start working, and there's always going to be times to celebrate, but you got to put yourself first. And it sounds selfish, but I think that's such a key characteristic to get anything done. You have to be, unapologetically selfish.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's an interesting concept. Like with the friends, is like you do really find out who your real friends are. Some people are with you, the party, the promoting, all that good stuff, and then once they don't have that leverage on you, or they're not getting anything from you directly, it's like they're not as supportive.
Mm-hmm.
But like it paints a clear picture of like who's really with you, and you want to make your circle small as you get older. So it's the right way to be. Um, Diet wise, you're
Yeah.
talking about like maybe like the habits when you're younger can be a little bit looser in terms of like going out late nights, early mornings.
Mm-hmm.
How does nutrition play a role in that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a never-ending learning curve, and you read all these books, and it's like the vegan diet, the carnivore diet, the keto diet, and you're like, how do I know what to even believe, what to try, what to not to try?
Yep.
So to me, I think like a good kind of heuristic is like I won't bash it until I try it, and I think that's just like a good open-minded thing. So I tried a lot of the different diets of being vegan for over a month and seeing how it affects my body, kind of eliminating certain food groups. But the general principle like that I found, and kind of like a triathlon mentor of mine, um, his name's John Ragg. He's done 256 Ironmans, holds the record for the most, lives by, and it's the less legs, the better. So like a cow has, 4 legs. Red meat isn't as great as a chicken, which has 2 legs, and
Okay.
a fish has 0 legs. So a fish is like a little bit better for you than the 2 meat groups. And then, I think it's gradually progressing to this like more plant-based diet, and a lot of athletes are kind of coming out and portraying this. But I think it's, to me, like eating 80% clean, and then 20% in moderation is okay. Like it's okay to have a beer. Like I think people take things a bit too far and too drastic. But my personal refreshing way of thinking of it is like if you can eat 80% clean, whatever that looks like, you can still indulge 20% of the time, or like live life too, because you want to have fun. And you it's the same with training. If you can train 80% hard, like 20% of your training could be like playing volleyball on the beach with your friends, like having a beer. Like you can live a little bit as well, and I think that
Totally.
over the long run will keep you coming back.
Yeah. It's like those feelings and like the dopamine you get from eating sometimes like junkier foods, whatever. That's physiological too. So that's my like rationale for like eating like shit at times. It's like, hey, like you got to treat yourself and you got to enjoy the process. Part of enjoying the process is like flavors for me.
Yeah.
You know, is that kind of you spoke on like going vegan for a while and then maybe stepping back from that? Is that kind of just like I love like all kinds of food, or was it like I've heard some people say like it's really good from an inflammation standpoint, but from like a like energy standpoint, it wasn't really doing it for me. Like,
Yeah, so I mean, I'll be brutally honest. Like, I'm not a great cook, and I
yeah,
found, when I did the vegan diet, maybe it's just a lack of creativity, or
yeah,
not reading enough cookbooks. But I kind of came back to the same things. I was doing like avocado toast for breakfast every day,
yeah,
or avocados for lunch on salad. Like avocados as a supplementary, like finding legumes or beans, or doing wraps, but eventually I kind of did the same thing over and over again. And I think there is a lot of merit in it. I did notice quite a difference in just terms of like feeling more energized. I did feel more energized, but what I found was like my stomach shrank. And so when I went back to eat like a food group like meat, I noticed like my stomach didn't react very well. And
yeah,
I was like kind of concerned that maybe that wasn't a healthy thing. Like I couldn't eat, like after a while I couldn't eat like a proper meal. I was just eating smaller and smaller, and for the amount of volume and training I was doing, it was is like kind of scary.
Yeah.
So I decided to just kind of do what felt good for me, and that was implementing, pretty clean diet, but I still enjoy chicken and flavors like you said, and having like things that you're excited to eat every day, and yeah.
Cool. Where was your first Ironman race?
Yeah, so I guess the story we kind of jumped off, but
Yeah.
after I graduated from Queens, I went to work in the corporate world, and I went to work at Uber to help launch with Uber Eats in Toronto and Vancouver.
Cool.
Those were my markets. And I loved that. I had such a great time and met a lot of really cool people who are like some of my closest friends to date. And it was about a year and just under a year and a half that I had this like burning desire to do this triathlon, this Ironman. And so I did a bunch of research, found, if I was going to do this, I wanted it to be super special. I didn't think I would do more than one, but as like did my research, found New Zealand won the gold label award for the best triathlon experience. I decided, how can I either move with work to New Zealand or get there to do the race? And so I signed up for New Zealand, had it on the calendar, and now was like trying to transfer internally with Uber. Was proved to be like pretty bureaucratic, so it was hard to get that kind of transfer. So I decided that I would leave and still pursue the dream, which was a really tough decision because I loved my job and I loved the people, but
Yeah.
I just knew that I had to do this. So I decided to leave. I moved to New Zealand. I didn't know a single person when I went there, and I lived in a dry hostel because I knew I didn't want to be, surrounded by people partying all the time, and just kind of need to find my bearings, understand the landscape, and figure out an area that I could live in and train in, and decided to join this local triathlon club. And in a really weird roundabout way, Uber 1 month later was launching Jump, which is electric bikes and scooters. And I rejoined them to help with the launch. So rejoined Uber in a funny manner on like a new cool project. But so trained and lived in New Zealand for 6 months leading up to the race. And the first one was pretty special, but that was March 7th, 2020, pretty much a week just before the pandemic hit.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of the ultra marathon. It's 5K swim. Is that right?
3.8K swim.
3.8. 140K bike.
180K bike.
Oh my goodness.
42K run.
Yeah, that's something else. So when you're saying like 3 times a week for each discipline, for training, do you go to that level every day?
No, not necessarily. I think like with most training, what I've learned is like intensity rules. Like the more intense your workout can be, like the more efficient, your results will be, and the less strain you'll have on your muscles or your body.
Right.
So to me, it's kind of like maximizing the time that I could put into the training. So I think like, for running, for example, out of the 3 sessions, 1 session would be a long run. And that long run, might be, 2 hours or 21 kilometers up to kind of that benchmark, 21 to 30 kilometers. But you're never doing like the full distance of what the race would be. And then on like a Sunday, a long ride would be anywhere from 4 to 5 hours. So you're trying to do minimum 100-kilometer bike ride to replicate the time in the saddle that you'll be in the race. And then in the pool, most of it is actually technique based. So I don't really focus so much on distance. It's more about like getting a better technique and then getting out once a week or once every other week to do an open water swim, get like the real life experience of waves coming in, sighting with the sun, kind of like breathing in a certain manner, and replicate as much as you can for what that race day might look like.
Yeah, I might look decent swimming in a wave pool, but like open water is a different beast. So I can only imagine.
Man, so like when I first when I first signed up for the Ironman, I literally YouTubed how to swim. Like,
Yeah.
my legs would be like this in the pool, and I would just sink. And I'm like, this is going to be a long process. And even today, and I've done 5 Ironmans now, and I was in the pool this morning before work, and I was just like, I swear this never gets easier. Like,
Yeah.
why do I keep doing this? But I don't know. It becomes like something that has become a part of me, and you find like I find swimming very therapeutic. It's like one time where you can just like be in your own lane, no distractions, and like just think about your breath. And I think breath work is such an underrated kind of discipline to work on. And I've been working with a breath coach for the last 8 months, and every Tuesday I go to something called a sound bath, which is pretty much you lie in this room on a mat, and there's this lady in the middle with Tibetan drums, and she hits them with the mallets, making sound waves. And there's a guy who sits on the other side of the room and kind of talks you through how to breathe into the sound waves. And I found like the mental clarity you get from that has been like unparalleled to anything I've ever experienced. And I think it opened my mind to like the idea of a flow state, and when you're competing, how to get into a flow state, tap into it, and utilize it to your advantage to kind of get through those tough challenges.
Yeah. Speaking of like, I guess that would be that flow state is like if we're what feels like past our threshold, and you know that point where kind of the legs just start moving on its own. Like, is that the runner's high? I'm not an endurance runner, so I'm trying to like tap into kind of like, obviously you're running forever, you're biking forever, you're swimming forever. So there's got to be a point where anytime I'm running a 5K, like my legs just shut off and it's mind over matter. So like that breath work is for that kind of point.
Yeah, exactly, man.
Yeah.
Like to me, and there's this kind of this quote. It's like 90% mental, and then the 10% is in your head. So it's like 100% mental, which is not actually the case. Like you need to put in the work to train, but when it comes to racing and endurance, like it really is this mental battle of, can you take one more step further? Like when you're hurting, do you give up, or do you take that step further? And it's kind of like a metaphor for life. Like if you're faced with a challenge or an obstacle, or you're tired but you have to do something, are you going to push it off to tomorrow, or are you going to take a step further and get it done? And I think like the more steps you can take further, obviously the farther you'll go, right? But back to your question of flow state, like it's this euphoric feeling of tapping into this bliss of like my mind, my body are connected, and we're going through something like that you visualized, and like you knew you were going to do, and it hurts, but it's kind of like, it's so hard to describe, but it's just a euphoric feeling of like purpose and fulfillment. And I think like people find that with meditation or other elements of their life. But I don't know, like you played pro ball, like if you ever get the ball in your hand and you're just hot like on your game, you're sinking every shot, like what's different? Like you had something that clicked in your brain that's helping you like translate that into your physical output, right? So
Yeah. When you talk about like flow state, like it's Kobe that I've heard talk about that the most. And like for him, it comes through those reps, and like not just reps physically, like taking the shots or whatever. It's also like the mindful meditation and putting yourself kind of into that zone. And so that's probably a big part of your practice too, is like, even if I'm not at my max capacity that would be in the Ironman, it's that like when I'm in respective practice in the pool and like running half the distance, I need to channel what it would feel like and kind of visualize that.
yeah, and you talk
It's
about
cool stuff.
kind of reps and practice, right? And I think like the underlying kind of practice for flow state is like doing things that are hard, and to me that's like taking a cold shower, or waking up on your first alarm. And like the more I can do those things that are hard, the easier it is to push through like a hard physical or mental kind of barrier in a race, in an Ironman, or in life in general. So I think like putting the practice in of like getting out and doing that run when you really don't want to do it. It's like the hardest thing, but it's also the most rewarding, the most fulfilling, and the most impactful, right? So
Um, yeah, for those that aren't like competing in the Ironmans, well, I don't want to say every day, but just everybody else, right? What would be like the one kind of selling point or like elevator pitch for mental toughness or like meditation?
yeah, I think to me it's different for everyone, but I think like if I mean, it comes, I mean, even back kind of off topic a little bit, but back to goal setting. And I think like if your goal doesn't scare you, then it's not the right goal for you. I think you should try and choose things that scare you or challenge you a little bit, and kind of put yourself outside of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
But when it comes back to mindfulness and like being being aware of what you're doing, I think to me it's really about like intentions and living an intentional life. And like to me, living an intentional life means knowing what I'm going to do each day and not like kind of go through it aimlessly, which I think I was a culprit of, and I'm still a culprit of. And I think a lot of people, just kind of go day to day and don't really think about like who they're going to talk to, or who they're going to meet, or what they're going to say, or what they're going to do. And it could be as simple as writing something down of, one thing. What are you going to do today? What do you want to get done today? And it doesn't have to be this grandiose goal, right? It doesn't have to be an Ironman or like starting a business. It could literally be like, I want to say hi to one new person today. If you're working on your confidence, or you're working on like a weakness you want to turn into a strength. Like to me, like I didn't love socializing with a lot of people before, and that's why I think like Ironman is like a very like individualized sport for the most part, right? It's like solitude and grinding for a long period of time, but like going on a bus and like talking to your neighbor versus looking at your phone on the way to work. It's like small things like that kind of put you outside your element and help you.
So like you said, like intention and then like accountability, like giving yourself that every day. Yeah, no, that's powerful stuff. With the second Ironman, where'd you go?
Yeah, so the second one was Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay.
So that one was during the pandemic, and I think another kind of challenge to this journey so far has been dealing with ambiguity and dealing with uncertainty and things being changed last minute, or kind of like this idea of stay ready all the time. You have to be ready. You have to be kind of putting in the work so you can make it happen. So I was scheduled for Penticton, in just outside of Vancouver here, for I think it was September 26th, and they canceled the race. And this was like the third race I've had canceled, with the pandemic going on. And they gave an offer to do a transfer, and Chattanooga was the same date, September 26th. And I was like, I'm going to go. I got to get back on track. I've been putting in way too much work not to do a race. And like, it was one of the most like surprising little places. The people were incredible. The town was like super fun. They have this like big train station called the Chattanooga Choo Choo, and like it's just like such a unique place in the world. And I think that's where the stories come from, and like the excitement of this whole journey has been, you go to places and meet people you wouldn't proactively or think of top of mind. I would probably never would have gone to Chattanooga, but I'm so glad I did. I met some cool people. I learned about a place I've never learned before. And kind of, aside from the race, like just kind of random story, but their biggest kind of like attraction is the Chattanooga Aquarium.
Okay.
And they reached out to me. They heard about like my story of coming down to do these races in each continent, and they invited me to do a tour. But I didn't know I was gonna dress up in my wetsuit and like walk around the aquarium in my wetsuit.
That's funny.
So it was just like, I don't know, things like that sound so silly, but giving like props or knuckles to little kids because I'm in this like tri-suit and just looking so out of place is like so much humor in it that I'll remember, and it's like the things outside of the actual race that hold a lot of merit to me in this story of discovering who I want to be, or what I'm going to be. So,
Hmm. And like in the sense of like, or in the theme of like community and culture, do you find like the like Ironman community is like well connected?
yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's a pretty small world in the Ironman community. I
Hmm.
think a lot of people, it's a hard thing to do, so it attracts a certain type of person that wants to put in the work to become like a better version of themselves. And I think there's so many different realms of life that you can, but what appealed me to the most, or the community, was like, not only were these people doing well in these races or able to push through these races, back to this like business mindset, was like all of the people that I met were like the same discipline translated to whatever they were doing in their personal career.
Hmm.
And I found that out of any sport I've ever played or participated in, these were the highest achievers I've ever met.
Yeah.
Most people that were doing this sport were either entrepreneurs running their own business or high level executives at whatever company. And some part of me was like, this is really cool. Like, it's
Absolutely.
really cool to see like all these like-minded people coming together.
Um, what apps do you use? Are you on the Strava app?
I'm like, are you talking about like Tinder or something?
Yeah, no, 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 no. Are you single?
No, no,
Yeah.
I'm in a happy relationship.
Lucky girl.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I was just curious because like I recently got on the Strava app and I was like just amazed by how like the detail of it. I can see everybody that's ran a race in this random park in my neighborhood, and so like the amount of tech and like gadgets that are involved in the space is like mind blowing.
Yeah, there's some awesome ones, man. I'm
Yeah,
definitely on Strava. I found my girlfriend and I actually met on Strava. Funny story.
cool.
Um, but yeah, there's challenges. You can see your routes. It's like such a great discovery tool for new places, new routes. Like, I moved to Vancouver a year ago and kind of used that as my inspiration to find new bike routes or new run routes or new
Hmm.
trail kind of excursions, and all the challenges you can do on the app. I think it's fantastic. Some of the other ones, apps slash gadgets, I use a band called Whoop,
I think I've
WHOOP.
heard of it. Like tracks your like recovery and things like that.
Yeah,
Sleep.
yeah. So it tracks your sleep, and it's modeled after like three kind of tiers or circles of like a red ring, yellow ring, and green ring, and you want to be
Okay.
kind of optimizing for your green ring. So it'll look at your like physiological state, your sleep patterns, your heart rate, your respiratory rate, and like give you an overall score based on like your workouts and your sleep and the food you're putting into your body or the
Hmm.
alcohol. And I found that was pretty helpful for me to just kind of have an idea of how much rest or recovery I should be taking,
Yeah.
between exercise. The thing that kind of got to me though was like not getting enough sleep and reading that I wasn't getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
Previously you wake up, you like roughly whatever, you went to bed late and you got up early, you didn't have enough sleep, you just kind of push through it, right? You just like go through the day. But seeing like, oh, you got 4 hours and 17 minutes of sleep, the whole day I was thinking about that. I'm like, man, like I'm so tired. Like,
Yeah.
why? So I've recently gone off of it, but I think that probably could be a good indicator to tell me to get more sleep for it. But yeah, those are two apps that I really liked.
Yeah. And what about like body composition? As we're on the topic of like measurables. Um, do you like to be like a certain weight when you run? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I think like I'm 6'2", almost 6'3", kind of like a larger build for a typical triathlete or ultra runner. Um, I think my ideal weight is kind of between 180 to 185.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of like walking around right now at like a 190, 195.
Yeah.
So like kind of this threshold of 5 to 10 pounds, give it. Um, but yeah, I think like it's important to to do it in a healthy manner, you know, like eat as much as you can. That's going to help you sustain the hours that you put in, and kind of taper off accordingly to the upcoming race.
Yeah. And then, yeah, we talked about like an ideal weight,
Yeah.
but essentially, is there like a time in which you peak? So like you start off at, um, a certain capacity and intensity for training. Do you taper off, or do you kind of max all the way until,
Yeah.
competition day?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think like typically I would say yes, you should taper, but the nature of kind of the goal I'm going after of, you know, becoming the youngest person to do an Ironman on 6 continents, and the schedule that I was given,
Hmm.
I had to do 3 Ironmans in 3 months, which is a pretty short window. So after
Yeah.
Chattanooga, my third one was in Mallorca, Spain, and that was 3 weeks after.
Oh,
So there's
jeez.
not much time to recover, right?
Yeah.
And by the time you fly home and kind of get ready for the next one, it's like you barely get on your bike again. So it's kind of maintaining this like always ready kind of mindset, and like physical kind of benchmark and baseline. But to answer your question, like I think a good way to think about training for any race, an Ironman or a marathon or half marathon or 10K or 5K, is like in 10-week blocks. I think it's such a
Mm.
digestible amount of time. 2.5 months, you're working out hard. You can comprehend 10 weeks, and then kind of the week or two prior to the race is your taper off, and the week before a race like an Ironman. And to me, a lot of it is visualization, and kind of like visualizing what I'm going to be doing if I'm able to get to the race location a couple days before, like either driving the bike route or jumping in the water to feel what the water temperature is like, or walking the run route is like. So there's no surprises, right? There's no like mental jumps when you're doing it on race day. Like things
Mm-hmm.
are kind of familiar, and the more familiar, the more comfortable, the better you can execute. But yeah, 10 weeks is not like enough time to train for an Ironman. Like I'd say if it's somebody's, first Ironman, depending where you're at, like most people will take 6 months to a year to
Mm-hmm.
train properly. But generally I think like 10-week blocks is a great way to digest any race that you're training towards.
10 weeks. What about like recovery? So you're saying like in a space that you have 3 weeks to compete. Really, that's probably all you can focus on. Is like I've destroyed my body in terms of like micro tears and etc. Like, do you go to physio? Do you have your own kind of like tools and stuff that you use the most? Like, what does that look like?
I mean, I should,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, I just turned 26, but 25 when I did 5 Ironmans, and still very new to the whole endurance
Hmm.
realm. And I think to me it was like kind of this just throw myself in the deep end, and for a lot of it, like I probably could have done more training, done more research, done more preparation.
Hmm.
But my whole philosophy on life is like learn by doing, and you'll fail quickly, but you'll learn quickly. And
Absolutely.
to me, I kind of just like jumped in and said, I'm going to figure it out. And similar to, going to St. Mike's, going to Queens, like I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do these Ironmans because I want to see the world. I want to meet interesting people. I don't know how I'm like going to fund it. I'm going to find sponsors. I don't know how I'm going to get to each place. I'm going to work while I train and while I do it. But all I knew is like, I'm going to do it. So it's kind of once you want to do something,
Hmm.
like work backwards. So I knew I was going to do 6. I'm like, let's work backwards. Whatever it takes. If a race gets canceled, like I'm going to the next one. I'm going to be ready. I'm going to put in the work, and I'm going to make it happen. So it really comes back to this mindset, and maybe it's a delusional optimist. Like you think things are going to work out, and sometimes they don't, but more often than not, like they will.
Yeah. It's that concept of like execution over everything. Like even if something doesn't work out, you're learning something from that, and you'll take it to the next. Just keep
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, after, the second race, Chattanooga, my goal for the second one was to kind of set a personal best and break the 12-hour mark. My first race was 12 hours 9 minutes. The second one I wanted to beat 12 hours, and did that, got 11 hours 52 minutes. And then the third one, you know, Majorca was like 3 weeks after. I was like,
Yeah.
oh man, like this is gonna be tough. My body was pretty murked because I pushed it to the limits to kind of
Get your PB.
get my PB. And going into the next one, like recovery was a huge focus for me. It's like I did do massage. I did do like lots of stretching, ate like proper foods, prioritized sleep as much as I could. And it probably wasn't enough, but back to accomplishing anything, like you're never going to be fully ready to accomplish something. So it's like make the most of what you have and what you can do. So I decided like, yeah, I'm going to go and do this. Like I had to, it was another like off month race. Like I was scheduled for another race in Europe, but the continent opened up and the timing of the world with the pandemic allowed for this short window. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna do it. This is what's gonna happen. And then, yeah, not to go on a tangent, but like, then the next
That's
one.
what we're here for.
Yeah. Now the next one was like, now that's 3 down, 3 to go. The next one, Ironman Africa, South Africa, was 5 or 6 weeks after that one. So 3 and 3 months, September, October, November. And I was like, okay, let's do it. Like I learned from the last one. I've, you know, crossed the line in Majorca, which at the time was the hardest one I've done. Executionally proved to be quite a challenge. Like my nutrition didn't work out so well. The bottling of my bike didn't work out so well. My bike actually broke, so I had to figure out a new bike for that race. Anyways, like learned a lot, and that's kind of this whole process. But going into Ironman number 4 in South Africa, I was a little bit more prepared. I knew what to expect now that I've done 3. I had my nutrition game on lock. I kind of knew mentally that I could do this. And I think that's the huge advantage going into any race was like most people psych themselves out. And that's kind of when, you know, things go wrong. You're like, oh, I don't know if I have enough nutrition. I don't know if I have enough X, Y, Z. And then things go sideways. But going into Africa, I felt pretty confident that I knew what to expect. I studied the race course. But it was like a crazy day. Like it was like a crazy windstorm. And, you know, the pros go out first, right? And you watch them and you're lined up on the beach. And the waves are like, it was like Call of Duty map. There's a helicopter patrolling over the ocean or the bay, Nelson Mandela Bay. And it's like the waves are almost 6 feet washing these athletes back. And these are like the best people. And you're like, I got to go into this.
Yeah.
You know, people are like crossing their legs because they're so scared. It's like, well, okay, let's go. But yeah, and
it's
then,
a good visual.
Yeah, it was cool.
What is like the biggest like take home from these first like 5 races?
I think that all of us are so capable of so much more than we think we are. To me, you know, we have these perceptions that we can only achieve so much, and there's these kind of four walls around us we build, and I think that's just through society as a whole. And I don't know, to me it's like what I found is I think the world needs more dreamers now than ever, with, you know, being divided, wars going on, pandemics going on, like suicide rates at an all-time high. People are confused. They don't know what's going on. And I think that we need people to step up, and especially young people that have big dreams and big goals, whatever they are, and like motivate their peer groups to keep going, and motivate people if they can get through the next 24 hours together, they can get through whatever, you know. And I think that's what I'm learning, and through this environment of kind of pushing my body and myself, like doing the Ironmans is almost secondary. Like it's been so rewarding to do them like physically, but like secondary to the outcome of the journey I'm setting myself on. And that's like, the lessons I learn, the cultures I get to experience, the different types of people I get to meet, and the stories I get to share and tell is like what I'm kind of seeking. And right now I feel lost. Like I don't know where I'm heading, what I'm supposed to do. Like, I was in a corporate world, like kind of all respects, like had a stable job, and I left to chase some crazy dream, but it just feels right. And
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going to lead or what it's going to lead to, but I do know it feels right. And I think more people should chase their dreams.
Absolutely. Yeah, like you're saying, like there's a lot of activism, but there's not a lot of action.
Mm.
And like you're a prime example of kind of leading and being a leader through action, doing exactly what you set yourself up to do and kind of what you set your mind to and just continuing to go, right? Um, Kind of like back on like the entrepreneurial side or like the business side of things, like you left school and you ended up at Uber.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of like pushed you that direction?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I guess, experiences prior to that, I don't really talk about it too much, but I think it's important now, like to be open about. Is like when I was younger, I did modeling and I lived like in Italy from 16 to 19, and
Cool.
something I was always like self-conscious about, but was also a cool experience. I got to meet like really cool people from all parts of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and I lived in this model bunk with 8 other guys in
Yeah.
one bathroom, and like saw things that I never thought I would see. But it was this whole idea of like seeing the world. And then when I went to Queens, like it was this huge shift to all these like corporate kind of mindsets and business mindsets, right? And so naturally, all my friends in first year, I went and did modeling in Italy in my first year, and then I was seeing everyone was working at the big banks or the big consulting firms. And
Mm-hmm.
I think back to this thing, like you become a product of your environment. This next summer I was like, okay, I got to try and like find an internship at a bank.
Yeah.
And so that summer I did an internship at a bank in capital markets, and it was like banging my head against the wall because I was like, this is not what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you also, back to like learning by doing, you learn what you like, you learn what you don't like. So the second summer or third summer, I guess, like I switched all my courses to marketing and sales because that's kind of what I was gravitating towards, and did an internship at an experiential marketing agency. So it was a complete 180, but I learned like so much in that summer internship.
Yeah.
And then going into my final year, I kind of realized like, I took like a sales course with this professor, Jim Hamilton, and I think like sales is kind of gets a bad rep, right? It's like pushy, but really it's like uncovering value and mutual value for two parties and like helping people. And I found like that was like an area I would like to kind of explore. But I also think on a bigger level, it's like the number one skill set that's transferable. Whatever career or whatever you go into, you have to sell something, like yourself, right? In an interview, you have to sell yourself. You have to be presentable. So I thought like this would be a great way just to start my career, quote unquote, and learn about like sales as a whole, and specifically, in the tech sector, because that kind of was interesting to me. And so I started applying to all these different jobs, and one guy who went to Queens, a couple of years older, was working at Uber at the time, and we jumped on like a phone call, and he kind of told me all about it. And there was a small team at the time. I think I was number 17 on the Uber Eats team when I joined.
Wow.
And in that year, we grew 3 offices. So we went from 17 to 43 people in just over a year, and moved 3 offices. And kind of being early on and seeing this growth, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about just the business world, and kind of all the different kind of things that go behind the scenes to make, a user experience happen. That, Uber is now a verb, and like people use it every day. And so that's kind of how I got into
Totally.
it.
Is it true that Uber owns Lime? You know?
Yeah. So Jump, which was Uber's kind of electric vehicle vertical,
Yeah.
Lime acquired the business operations portion of Jump. And then I
Gotcha.
feel like by now they've taken over. So, but there was a time where you could open a Lime app and see both Lime and Uber scooters or Jump scooters or vice versa on the Uber app. But yeah, I think it is one entity now.
Yeah, you're speaking about like kind of launching like the Jump in New Zealand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that came to mind was like just like the college situation with Lime scooters in the States.
Mm.
And like what is it? I love Lime. Like when I was in Montreal, I love the concept like they were everywhere before pandemic. You could just like hop on one and take it wherever you want to. But I know in the States they had some issues with that. Like people would just like take them and leave them wherever, and like the GPS and things like that. Like
Yeah, yeah. It was like, I mean, when I say I like worked, kind of on the ground, like as much as it sounds cool, like it wasn't a glamorous role at all. I was like in the trenches in this warehouse. Like my title at the time when I first started was a field technician. So I was literally building these scooters, like putting the stickers on, testing the brakes, putting the wheels together, and like waking up at 4 a.m. and did a shift work from 4 a.m. to 1 p.m. Reason being 4 a.m. to get the scooters charged and then get them into the city before people would take them to work.
Wow.
Right. And then so I'd go 4 a.m., do this, and eventually like moved up to like a lead field technician, which essentially was like helping make the processes a bit smoother and working with public policy to get like designated zones where we could drop off more scooters. But yeah, it was like doing 4 a.m. to 1 p.m., going home, sleeping, then waking up and training for this Ironman for 6 months. And it comes just back to like the prioritizing what's important to you. But
Yeah. There's always a cliche saying that like athletes make good like employees in the corporate world. But like, can you speak to that? Like, being like having been that person like firsthand, like what kind of characteristics as an athlete help you to be successful in that space?
yeah, I mean, I think it's like learning with a team and working with a team, being an athlete and like both an individual contributor, but also like on a hockey team where it's like all about the team, in a work function, it's usually a team effort, right? And like you have to be kind of an expert in your field, but you're contributing to a greater cause. So I think there's a lot of transferable skill sets of like being a team player, acting like an owner, like all these kind of things that the workplace looks for. You learned when you were younger that you might not have been able to articulate, but are naturally there, and then you hone in on them. But I think to me, like naturally being an athlete, and everyone is an athlete. If you can move, you're an athlete.
Right.
I think like you're innately competitive. You're innately like have this desire to do well and achieve and be a high achiever. And I think that's something that employers look for, is somebody that's driven, motivated, gritty, but can work in a team. And if you can compile those, then I think you can be successful.
Yeah.
But the counter and like a lesson I think worth noting is like when you want to climb, like to climb with, open arms and not sharp elbows. And I think just the metaphor of that, of like building others as you build yourself, is so important. And, in my own journey, like learning to highlight and celebrate all the people that have helped me to get to this like races. I couldn't have done it on my own, and I think it's so important to like call out those people and like talk about them and like the impact they've had on you. And yeah.
Absolutely. Just as sort of a wrap up, a couple questions that I like to ask everybody. I think we had some good answers in the past. Just this first one's a little weird, but if I was to go to your house or your place right now, what would I find in there that I probably wouldn't find at others?
That's a great question. Well, I mean, right now I'm living on my brother's couch, so probably I have this little book called Why Don't You by Josh Lynott. And it's kind of like a picture book with quotes, and then it asks you to fill in some of the quotes of like your own personal achievements or
Cool.
your own kind of goals. And I think that's just like something I keep on the table to look back on and reflect on and look forward to as well when I come home, to just like get some inspiration when I need it.
Awesome. If you could live inside of any movie, what would it be, or which one would it be, and why?
Oh man, I think Inception.
Mm.
Yeah, it's just so multi-layered, and it's pretty much a dream within a dream within a dream. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a depiction of being a delusional optimist, that you're always chasing a dream.
Well said. Um, to like your younger self, do you have a message for him? Would you change anything? Keep it all the same.
Um, I don't think I would change anything. I think back to everything is kind of like a learning opportunity and kind of molds you, your experiences, good and bad. So the message, though, I think would be to anyone is like, focus on your life resume, not your paper resume. And what I mean by that is like, a degree is great, accolades are great, but they don't define you. I think your experiences and your failures actually help define you, whether that's trying a startup, trying a club, or traveling, and recognizing like also like the privilege to be able to do so, but to take it if you have an opportunity to go out and travel a little bit, see
That's
the world.
awesome. Well, that's a bar. No, thanks for coming out, Connor. I really appreciate it. And I think there's so much content here that people can learn from. Really inspirational. And you still have one more to go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
next month.
Okay. So where's that going to be?
It's called Florianopolis, Brazil.
Brazil. Wow. Okay. Well, all the best to luck to you. And again, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.